Hey, Melissa Wick here. I own Wick Law Offices, a small business law firm here in Columbus, Ohio. Today, we're going to talk about vesting schedules, which are a pretty complex topic. But, not too long ago, I had somebody come to me who has a really hot little tech startup, and originally there were three founders, right? And they went to a lawyer and they had all the stuff drafted. They had a vesting schedule put together that they thought accounted for, different varying scenarios and set reasonable goals. However, what happened was, a founder decided to leave. A founder left, and most of their interest had vested. And so this company was struggling because when a founder has vested certain equity that they were given at the start of the company, they start to lose incentive to continue to work, right? So it's super duper important, right? If you're going to start a company with somebody, you have to understand and you have to know who you're doing businesses with, right? Like, lawyers are super great at drafting, and a smart lawyer can draft a contract that can cover lots of different scenarios. But you know what the truth is, at the end of the day, sometimes a lawyer in smart contract drafting can't fix certain problems, right? So I want to talk to you a little bit today about vesting schedules and just how you should generally think about them when you're going to form a company with your other founders. Okay, so the first rule is that ownership isn't just based on like who had the idea or who's put in the most work or money, from the start, right? That's not really how you want to think about vesting and ownership in the company as it grows forward. The second thing is that ownership should be based on who's going to contribute what to the future of the company, right? It's sort of forward looking. It's sort of like when you think about ownership, you're thinking about what expectations you're setting for somebody to do certain things as the company goes forward into the future, right? So listen, ask yourself, what is each founder expected to contribute and when? That should be really clear. That's pretty basic, but you'd be surprised, right? What is each person going to contribute and when? The second question you need to ask is the contribution tied closely to the development of a certain project or, the completion of a certain task? Or is it something that's more like general leadership that's going to be given over a duration of time, right? And then the third thing you want to address and account for in a vesting schedule is, has the founder already done some of this stuff? Like, has some of this been provided already? Have they already started the contributions, right? You want to take into account that stuff as well. Lastly, I want to talk about three common vesting issues that happen with startups. The first one being the founder leaves, right? So you might start a company with founders who you trust, right? But sometimes, people after 2, 3, 4, 5 years go by, they change their ideas about what they want to do for their lives, right? So, what happens is sometimes a founder will leave. They'll leave the company, but the problem is a lot of their equity maybe has vested per the cap table, right? So that becomes a big problem. If a founder leaves, then the other founders are sort of stuck with working their full-time efforts towards the company, and maybe one founder isn't doing that, but they still are holding on to that equity. So really they could sit back and wait for a big payday, right? So that's a situation that tends to be super complicated and also stall momentum and also get in the way of you attracting other funding, because these funders, these investors can sort of sense this. They can sort of see, hey, there's this founder that's not really in the game anymore, right? So that's something you really want to avoid and have a plan for. The second problem is that founders, surprisingly enough, don't put their agreements in writing, which is crazy to me, but happens all the time, right? So you might come to me with, a lot of verbal agreements and kind of like separate contracts dealing with certain things, and it's not all one comprehensive plan, right? So it requires a lot of legal cleanup. And so the biggest thing I want to tell you is to make sure you put your agreements in writing, right? Don't have verbal arrangements, and spend some time with a lawyer so that you understand the structure of your company. The third thing people tend to want to do is just say, hey, like, why don't we just have the equity granted like later down the road when the company is kind of like made it, right? The problem with that is that if you do that, if you grant equity down the road when the stock is worth more because you've grown the company, you're gonna have a very bad tax consequence. And that sounds good in theory, but it creates a big tax problem, because generally the person who is then granted that equity will be taxed on it as ordinary income, and oftentimes you may not have the money to actually pay the taxes on such a big grant of of income. And listen, this stuff is really, really complicated. What I'm talking about here today just barely scratches the surface. I mean, this is really driven by, details and circumstances that are specific to you. So if you need help with this, please don't hesitate to give me a call at 614-572-6366 or email mwick@mwicklaw.com. Thanks so much for watching.